Hey, everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Psychedelic. I am your host, Mike Brancatelli. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the show, thanks for checking us out. Today is a good one. We got Gordon White of Rune Soup, myself, and Ed Liu of Psychedelic Milk. This is one of the bonus TriCast things that me and Ed are doing. Each month, we're going to release an episode with me, Ed Liu of Psychedelic Milk, and then another guest, and try and have like a kind of roundtable sort of discussion or free form discussion, something like that. So yeah, this is a good one, and I'm so excited that I get to find out about these new and interesting people that are, kind of like in the same realm that I'm in, but in a different realm that I don't know much about. Magic, the occult, paranormal. That's not really my forte. I don't really have a ton of experience with that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of parallels between that and the stuff that I talk about on this show with psychedelics and spirituality and libertarianism and anarchy and voluntarism and those sorts of things. There's a lot of areas to mesh and to flow together. So it's really cool. The more and more I go down, the rabbit hole of learning and finding guests and reading and doing stuff, it's like there's always another door that's opened. There's always more layers to the onion to be peeled, and it's so cool. So this was like kind of not necessarily like an even playing field, really. I mean, it was more like I feel like me and Ed were really learning a lot from Gordon because he's an expert in these topics. He runs a blog called Rune Soup, and he has a podcast called Rune Soup, and they really get into it with a lot of things that like I said are kind of out of my area of expertise, but similar and fun to learn from and to bounce back and forth with and to talk with him about. And I want to have more guests on the show that are involved in this sort of area of the occult and the paranormal and magic, and who's not fascinated about this stuff? I mean, it's so fascinating. Oftentimes we see things going on in the world, and there's all this surface level of what we see, and then there's so much that's like deeper beyond what we see, and there's so many points of entry. So this is another point of entry, and it's really, really awesome. So I really enjoyed myself on this one. I was a little kind of out of my element because I was recording on the road. So I was mobile. So I kind of didn't have my setup, and I just didn't really. But anyway, whatever. Yeah, it was a good one. I hope to have Gordon back on the show. I would love to pick his brain more and to get into more conversations with him about some of the things that expand on some of the things that we talked about in this show. So yeah, just to give you a little taste, I mean, Gordon is involved in magic, economics, science and health, geopolitics, all kinds of like the occult, paranormal, as I said, all kinds of things that all mesh into each other to make a really fascinating individual Gordon White is. So if you guys are enjoying this show, help me out, help support this podcast. There's a couple ways you can do it. One is you could just leave me a nice 5-star rating and review on iTunes. That really helps the show grow. It helps spread this message and expose it to more people, and get little podcasts like me out to a bigger audience, and expose me and Gordon and Ed to a wider audience, and get the ideas that we're talking about that we find so fascinating and so important to a wider group. I know that this isn't probably something that has wide mass appeal. Wide mass appeal is like, I don't know, Migos and Drake and Nicki Minaj or whatever. But reality housewives and this thing and that thing, whatever. I mean, I think that's kind of where our culture's at for the mass mainstream. But hopefully, plugging along with the kind of ideas and things that we're talking about in my sort of pseudo intellectual way, that that people will find them interesting and entertaining and want to, learn more and that sort of thing. So if you can leave a nice rating and review on iTunes, that helps the show out a lot. Right now we have 65-star ratings and reviews on iTunes. It's amazing. And you don't even have to write anything. If you just take out your phone and you search for Mycadelic, MIKEADELIC, Mycadelic. Search for that and then just click 5 stars, like leave a review and just click 5 stars if you think that we deserve 5 stars. So far 60 people have thought that, so it's pretty good. I'd love to get to 100 by the end of the year. That'd be really cool. And yeah, maybe I'll do some kind of like giveaway or something for like the 100th review or something like that. I don't know, but I like to read the reviews on air. I got a couple of reviews recently, not too detailed, just more things like, or not too detailed, just things like killer podcast, way to go, keep it up, great work, awesome show. So, just a couple words like that is fine, or just no words at all, just clicking 5 stars and leaving that. So it helps the podcast grow. It helps us get pushed up into the category that we're in, and it helps people who are searching for psychedelics and liberty and magic and spirituality and those sorts of things find us. And then when they find us, they'll click on and decide to give it a listen, hopefully enjoy it. And so please subscribe and share with your friends if you can, whatever episodes you feel are most interesting. And let me know too, give me feedback. A lot of this show is guided by what you guys say to me. If I kind of do what I do because you guys keep telling me that like this is good or this isn't good or do this or do that, and I listen to you. So I keep trying to make the shows that you enjoy. So thank you very much. And another way you can support the show is if you go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/MikeBrank, BRANC, and just donate to the show, help support the show. $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever you could afford. If you have some extra scratch laying around and just want to throw it my way, that's cool. You got an extra couple of Federal Reserve notes burning a hole in your pocket. You just got to get them out of there. Throw them on Patreon. Give them to Mike Brank. And I'll put good use to them. All the money that I'll receive from this podcast, I try and put into the show, into buying better equipment and, getting better sound quality, better production value. It's just me doing this. It's just all me. So I reach out to the guests, I book the guests, I set up the interviews, I record the show, and I edit the show. I put the music in, then I built my website myself, and I put it on the website, and I do everything. So it'd be nice to kind of grow the show and expand it. And I'd love to get to like 10,000 listeners by January or something like that. By next year, by having 10,000 listeners would be amazing. And from then I would love to do some marketing for the show, put some money into it, design some really cool like little video clips or art with like some quotes or something, and get them out there, target people on Facebook who are interested in the things that we talk about, and hopefully put this in front of them and see if it's something that they enjoy and they like, and hopefully we can grow the show and spread it. But I need your help. So if you can, just leave me a nice rating and review on iTunes or donate on Patreon, and we'll spend that money in the right way to grow this show. And any ideas that you guys have, any feedback, if anybody wants to collaborate on anything, I'm all ears. You can always message me anytime, Facebook, Twitter, go on my website and contact me any way that you want. I really want this to be kind of a collaborative mission with you guys who care about what I'm doing here and care about what I'm saying, to let me know, let me know when I'm doing good. Let me know when I'm fucking up. Let me know when, let me know if you have any ideas on how to make the show better, grow the show, or things to do, things like that. And yeah, that would be great. That would be really cool. So that's it, really. This is an awesome conversation with a fascinating individual, Gordon White of Rune Soup. Myself and I almost said Ed Milk, Ed Lou of Psychedelic Milk. So that's it. That's for the intro. I'm going to try and keep these intros under 10 minutes. Sometimes they go to like 16 minutes. I apologize for that, but I mean, I'm a guy that can do a solo show for 2.5 hours. So, put a microphone in front of me and I just can't stop talking. I mean, I do love the sound of my own voice. Isn't it nice and soothing? I've been thinking about maybe doing some voiceover work. Let me know what you guys think about that. Like I could read books like on Audible, I think that would be good. Chapter 1. Lewis entered the bedroom, looked at Miranda. Miranda turned and said, "My God, you don't have enough fiber today. You need a fiber well." I just okay, riffing a little bit. But yeah, some people like, yeah, you have a really good voice for that. And like I never really thought that I had a good voice for doing this, but yeah, I think it would be fun to do that. I also like to do impressions, so sometimes I throw out some videos on YouTube doing some Trump impressions, Alex Jones. I just did one making fun of that guy Paul Joseph Watson, who I find to be a ridiculous human being. But yeah, anyway, we're having fun. We're having good times. Oh man, I went over 10 minutes. All right, I got to shut up and let you guys enjoy this awesome show with Gordon White of Rune Soup and Ed Lou of Psychedelic Milk.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
Mike Recatelli and also Gordon White, two of the favorite podcasts of mine, of course, Psychedelic, talking about psychedelics, politics, libertarianism. And also I just saw your video on your impersonation of Paul Joseph Watson, which is really funny. And also we have Gordon White from Rune Soup, and also one of my favorite podcasts. I think you have about like 80 something episodes now, and your podcast is incredibly interesting because while I focus mainly on psychedelics and that whole experience, Mike focuses on somewhat politics and psychedelics. You focus on a bunch of other really paranormal things like magic and the occult and even psychedelics, and sometimes you talk about politics and governments and things like that. So the first thing I want to ask you is, for the people that are unfamiliar with magic, can you just tell the audience what magic is? Because there's this misconception, I think, in the public with magic being this evil spell casting witch thing that people would do to themselves or to other people to manipulate the surroundings or thoughts of other people. Is that accurate, or is there something else going on?
Well, that's accurate. It's a subset, I suppose, of what we would consider magic for the purposes of this discussion, which I've sort of described before as magic is a culture-specific set of techniques for essentially interacting with your own consciousness and presumably other consciousnesses. So when you talk about some of the things we cover on Rune Soup, yes, we do, entheogens and so on, because we're really talking about the one enchilada, and just kind of depending on which end you eat it from. So why I describe magic as culture-specific sort of sets of consciousness techniques is, if you look around the world at different quote-unquote magical systems, whether it's Amazonian shamanism or whether it's, Taoist magic or what have you, there's the number of things you can kind of do with it are actually quite conserved. Like, there's not that many categories. There's sort of predicting the future, talking to the dead or spirits, there's visiting other worlds, and there's in some sense what I call probability manipulation, which is obviously practical enchantment. So that's how I tend to define magic for people who are coming at it cold.
Now, what is your favorite area of your podcast? Because there's so many categories, and you have magic, of course, occult, psychedelics, politics. What is your most interested topic at this moment?
That's a kind of tough one. So I sort of have a formula that I go through. I grew up, I'm back in regional Australia now, but I grew up in regional Australia. And when I first found, occult books and sort of realized this was for me at a fairly early age, there was no internet, and everyone who wrote these things was in England. And I subsequently met most of them, the ones that are alive. But at the time, it was this, I didn't know what they were like. And I have this sort of subtextual goal with the podcast of turning kind of voices into humans. So I don't know if I have a favorite category. The home base is obviously magic practiced in a Northwest European tradition, because that's, my home base, I suppose.
Right.
But it's what I kind of wanted to do from the outset was to demonstrate that, as I was, referring back to the enchilada, that we are talking about the one enchilada. It's interesting. I don't know if you guys listen to Skeptico, but I'm quite friendly with Alex from Skeptico, and he came at that journey from a consciousness science perspective. But if you stick on it for a while, if it's entheogens, if it's consciousness research, if it's the practice of magic, you kind of eventually come around to the realization that you're talking about blind men and the elephant at this point. So that you can't have a discussion about the sort of implications of psychedelia if you're not going to have a discussion about consciousness effects. And if you're having a discussion about consciousness effects, you're having a discussion about, well, what are humans' natural consciousness capacities, which is magic. And then you end up having the discussion about, okay, well then, why has power historically been so interested in this forever? I mean, from Sumeria on, why has power been so interested in either suppressing or exploring this? So it's funny. You kind of there are many roads into Chapel Perilous, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely interesting. It's really this thing that has become almost kind of cartoonized. It's like we have a tendency, I think the average person has a tendency to think of magic as something that's just pure fantasy, and there's no real world applications to these kinds of things. Yet, you see they come from somewhere, whether it's from our imagination creating the different forms and facets, like you said, of attacking the enchilada from a different angle. I had someone recently on my podcast, Miguel Connor. He hosts a podcast called Aeon Byte. It's a Gnostic radio podcast, and he was talking about Gnosticism. And that's kind of another approach, I think, that's leading down the same route that we're all seeking, the same kind of route that we're all on, whether it be, like you said, through psychedelics or other avenues. But I'm pretty interested in there's so many different kinds of facets to it. Like there's chaos magic. What specifically is chaos magic?
Chaos magic. It's interesting when you're talking about its prominence and the sort of ridicule that comes along with a lot of it contemporaneously. This sort of thing appears to go in cycles. Like if you just go back 120 years and look between now and, then and now, there have been multiple sort of fads of magic and occultism and so on, and we're quite clearly in one. So that kind of goes along with it. But chaos magic, as I explore it and practice it and write about it, emerged in the north of England and then kind of northern London in the 80s as a response to a lot of, very inside baseball stuff that was going on in the occult world in the UK at the time. But on a macro level, it was the internecine fighting and breakdowners of the 19th century order models, particularly the ones to do with Aleister Crowley, and also some flow-on effect from the 80s coming inevitably right after the 70s, and there's a lot of Age of Aquarius stuff going on. So this group of practicing magicians decided to sort of shake the snow globe and see what works and what doesn't. And is the effect associated with Apollo, or is it associated with something else? And really stripping down a lot of the nonsense that accretes over magic to an experimental and performative basis, and essentially having this one yardstick, which has its limitations, but is very good as a necessary starting point, which is, does it work or does it not? So kind of really interrogating the actual practice of it. And it's called chaos magic because one of its founders and its sort of preeminent, I guess, exponent is a guy called Peter J. Carroll, and he's written loads of books on it. And at the time, if you recall or are aware, this is when chaos mathematics was sort of coming to the fore in the 80s as well, with the rise of computing and that sort of realization. And there was a popular science book called Chaos by James Gleick, which explains what was understood as chaos mathematics at the time. And Pete has a background in science and physics. So basically he says, well, let's call it chaos magic, which is great. And that's what I mean by it. The term, because chaos is such an emotional term, and it's certainly, which is why chaos mathematics used it, presumably. You also find the term expressed in, tabletop gaming systems, and also in wider politics. Now people may use terms like chaos magic because, time of chaos and so on. So it's got a name that means something very specific if you're in the occult world, but if you're not in the occult world, it broadens out to include things that are not actually included in it, if that makes sense.
So is our current political situation actually in chaos magic, or is it something that people that are not in magic call it chaos magic because it seems chaotic?
Yeah, it's sort of like that. There are a couple of people in sort of, I guess, Putin's sphere that are using the term and or were in his sphere, and they aren't wow. Chaos magicians in the kind of British term of it, right? So in that sense, it's the same thing as witchcraft or no one actually owns the term, and it's applied in different ways. But the chaos magic that you will find in actual occultism has nothing to do with any of that stuff, but they're very emotive terms. Like, same thing, no one owns the word spell or enchantment or so on. So they don't connect, they just have the same name.
Right. Mike.
Ed. Hello. Well, Gordon. this is so far, Gordon. This is so far out of my knowledge base, but I feel that, just using kind of what I've known from experimenting with psychedelics and kind of, embarking on spiritual practices and meditation and things like that, and just kind of expanding my consciousness to accept a diverse realm of units and games and things to kind of construct. It's like I can see the application of it being used at a very high level and being, ultimately to me, when I hear something like that, it's like, you're talking about politics and the chaos magic and stuff. It's like, we hear these talks of political leaders at doing these ceremonies, skull and bones type things. And it's like, are they conjuring up some kind of sorceress plans, or is this just fantastical conspiracy theory that's fun to kind of believe, to imagine? Or is there some truth to this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a bit of both. Again, it's an example of non-overlapping worlds. So if you deal with people who are actively and publicly, exploring occultism and magic, they're not the kind of people who get invited to Bohemian Grove. But historically, there has been an interest in going, like, the most famous example is Elizabeth I, whose court was lousy with wizards, the most famous one being John Dee, who more or less invented the idea of a British Empire. But people in power are interested in occultism because it works. That's how you stay in power. You do the things that work. So right. You see a lot of, it doesn't mean they're all part of some kind of, it certainly doesn't mean they're all part of some kind of secret thelemic club. It just means, and probably more at a fulfillment level, and we know this through kind of the history of the Cold War, things like MK Ultra and MK Often and so on. At a fulfillment level, there is an awareness that this stuff works, and they're in the business of, running the world. So if it works, you have to be interested in it. It doesn't necessarily follow. I think a lot of the, most of the stuff, over 90% when we're talking about super elite ritual behavior, ritual works, and it is actually just how they think, like, red carpets and parades and so on. They think ritualistically rather than performing secret rituals that you would find in a computer game. That said, it seems reasonably. It's a reasonable contention or assertion to make that at a super elite level there is a belief system going on that doesn't match how the rest of us live our lives, and that, I think, is sort of self-evident in some odd signaling behavior at a kind of billionaire and above level. But it's kind of dangerous roads to go down, because you have to make certain assumptions about whether they're all in the one bed, and whether they all have, like, it comes with its own presuppositions to do with how the world is run. Like, is it one little secret cabal running the world and so on? And that doesn't seem very likely. What you can see is probably an awareness that their belief systems aren't the same as us down here at this level.
Now, I'm not sure about the specifics of the rituals for magic, but I know some of them require you to face a certain direction to invoke that spirit at that certain time. I think some you have to smell good, or if they burn incense, because the spirits, they like things that smell good, and if you stink, it kind of deters them away. And there is also this requirement of your mind having to think about certain things, or to have some sort of a mindset to go in with that ritual. Now, is it just that person, the elite or whoever it might be, is having a positive mindset or having that intention of causing those things to come into effect? Or is it those specific rituals and the direction and the incense and all those props that they're using that are really causing the changes that are going on around them? Or is it both?
It's probably closer to both. I think there is a ritual aesthetic. And there's interesting research that has technically, although it satisfies the broader definition, very little to do with magic about this, where if you look at Gulf states, they are especially interested, and the same thing actually with the rise of the sort of billionaire class in China. They're very, very interested in a kind of platonic shape of what royalty or a super elite looks like, to the point where, because Britain has loads of leftover royals, like you get this sort of Prince Charles' third cousin going over to teach Arab princesses how to eat sandwiches and that kind of thing. Like, seriously, these kind of things happen.
It just sounds so funny, though.
It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but this is what I mean by they have a ritual aesthetic. Right. Because that's what happens when you get to that level in the club. Like, they think and see the world that way. So I think a lot of what people panic about is that. Historically, there's been, psychological operations which also satisfy the definition, of course, of magic and so on. But I don't think the power doesn't, quote unquote, the power of people who might be interested in ritual at a super elite level doesn't derive from the ritual or the performance of it. It just comes along with it. Now, there's a much wider question as to, well, are you dealing with the spirit world that has, ambassadors at a super elite level that are consciously or not fulfilling a physical agenda? And that, speaking of Miguel, that you're in full blown Gnosticism at that point. And there's something to be said for at least temporarily interrogating the world with that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that with these kinds of ideas that we have about what we're engaging in, it's kind of like how we're willing to calibrate the level of our belief system, I think, has a large impact in the results that we shape. In a sense, I think it was Robert Anton Wilson who was famous for saying that we kind of create these reality tunnels, and it seems like to me that the certain kind of setting that you would have when taking place in a ritualistic magic session, I guess it would be called, is very similar to how someone would engage in say an ayahuasca ceremony. There's certain kinds of things that you would want to do, and tobacco, you would want to have tobacco. You would want to maybe wear white so you can attract, white spirits. And in a sense, it's like all of these things. We're kind of creating what we've heard and what we know to put into that, but also we're expecting to get something in return. So it's kind of reinforcing that expectation and creating it as long as we're believing in that. Does that make sense? Like, I think
it does, but I'm not sure if that's sufficient to describe.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's sufficient if you want to use the ayahuasca example.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very good place where, well, it is magic. Like, that magic came first. That's what it is. Like, magic isn't just computer game stuff, right? Like, that's magic. And the trouble with that analysis is, you come out of it and you go, except those things that I went and saw were real.
Right.
So if you're going down the whole, I guess we're setting up the expectations and that shapes how we experience it. It has some presuppositions, like it has what I would consider a faulty science of mind underpinning it, which one is the separation of mind and physical to start with, and two, the a priori assumption that the spirits aren't real. Now, if you do any of these things for long enough, so in one of my books, in Chaos Protocols, I have a chapter called Becoming Invincible, which is you have to go and do something that makes you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a reality to these phenomena. And one of the examples is taking yourself off to the Amazon and for a week or so and doing the kind of least worst Amazonian shamanic experience. But it can be, and the example I gave in the book is, you can also take a couple of friends and an Ouija board and spend the night in an abandoned mental hospital, because you will come out of that changed. Like, it's not a great way. You won't have a pleasant evening, right? But I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care, because you've come out of it with the result, which is, okay, so these things are real. And I find when you see things like mindfulness meditation and ayahuasca and the interest of those things in Silicon Valley, there's people that have at that point a dysfunctional or faulty belief system, because they're only halfway there. They've just had these experiences and they can't actually sit with the implications of what that means. And that, I think, is one of the benefits of kind of pursuing these roads, things like psychedelia and magic, because there is a reality to it. So if there's a reality to it, it has implications for how the world works. And that's the bit that people trip over. And they trip over it because you have to kind of re-examine how you've built the world in your head at that point. But that, I think, is where we're at now. The science of mind that that went along with the imperial expansion in the 19th century, and we inherited from Descartes, the mind matter split, and you used the words earlier, Mike, like, well, it's all fantasy or it's all in your head, as one way of people thinking about it, which is fine, except no one's define those words for me. Define, like, what imagination is and fantasy and what are they, because they don't belong in a materialist model. Like, not even on the chalkboard can you describe how a brain creates consciousness. So if people sit with those ideas for long enough, all of a sudden they're living in a haunted universe, which is in some sense freaky, but it's also satisfying.
Now, with magic, it seems like the implication is that, or the assumption is that, a lot of elites are using it, whether it's in governments or corporations, and they're summoning these spirits or whatever the case may be to gather more power and authority over people. And that's part of the reason why they're in the positions that they're in today. But one could argue that the people that are in power, say Donald Trump or Mark Zuckerberg or Vladimir Putin, they might have a lot of power and authority over people, but they're not necessarily living a happier life or a better life. As a matter of fact, I would argue that they're more stressed than ever, probably more stressed than the neighbor that's, living next door, that's living a plain life and has a couple of kids and maybe a farm or whatever. So does magic just conjure power and authority? Can it also have an effect on happiness?
I don't. Again, I want to stress that none of the people you just listed, Trump is technically a magician in that he ascribes to that a lot of that 19th century American positive thinking church stuff, right? So that's magic. That's like the things in my head will match the things in the physical world.
Right.
That's literally magic, right? But it's not cracking open the grimoires and sacrificing a goat. Like none of them are doing that. So I just want to emphasize, the way until you, and again, it's not for everyone, but until you sort of commit, actually, I'm going to learn something about, say, the Northwest European magical history. I'm going to sit down and work out what this is, right? You do have that much more Hollywood-esque view of what it is. And there are certainly, spirit and angel summoning components to it. But if you think of magic being as I said, like a way a culture explores human kind of natural consciousness capacities, that doesn't necessarily follow when you're in Mongolia with the shamans, or clever men in Australian Aboriginal like tribes and so on. It's not the same category there, but it is still magic. So I don't think it has. We kind of get that from fiction, right? I don't think it has some sort of inherent possession of the One Ring power that kind of erodes your life and makes things really, really bad. It can absolutely mess up your life, particularly once it starts to work, and that seems to be a feature of it rather than a bug. Because all of a sudden your whole life you thought you were playing netball, and you wake up and it's cricket, and so things go wrong. And that's kind of one of the things that happens with it. But we just, if we think of magic on a global basis, it takes a lot of the Hollywood drama away temporarily, so that you can look at it and go, okay, well, something else is going on here, because all of Peru isn't satanic or something.
Right. So is there like would there be a hierarchy then within these kinds of areas? I mean, I guess within magic, is there a hierarchy? Is there some kind of ultimate top position to be striving for, or some kind of use of it or application of it that would be the most noble or moral or righteous or whatever?
Not again. It sort of fails on a global basis. There are certainly invented clubs, particularly in the 19th century, where you got like the Golden Dawn and the Ordo Templi Orientis and so on, that sort of built a system that looks broadly like Freemasonry, so that you start at level 0 and you move up, right? So you can find them contained in that. You also find in what I would consider more authentic traditions outside, European influence, where you have multi-generational lineages in Africa and China and so on, where you can get to, if you're in it long enough, you're really, really good at it and you pass that on. But in terms of goals, it kind of comes back to the same goal as psychedelia and even mysticism. And to paraphrase Terence McKenna, the purpose of life is to familiarize yourself with the after-death state, so that the process of dying doesn't come as a shock to the system. That's the prize at the end. Well, that's the prize at the beginning of magic. Once you realize that, however you want to describe it, spirits in a spirit world are real, you're playing your life in God mode, because you don't die. I mean, you will expire, but it really.
So you're
changes
playing you're playing an infinite game, whereas other people are playing kind of a more limited, finite game. So there is kind of a superiority over people if you're seeing life and you're seeing reality in that way, right?
I wouldn't say superiority, because if you're living in a universe where you have things like a spirit world and meaning and so on, you don't know why those people came to Earth or what their journeys are or what have you. So it's not a superiority thing. And also you have the weird quiet confidence that comes from, I guess, presumably religious people have the same thing, where even you might have a friend who is materialist as the day is long, and you can be quietly confident that you can, tease him for it when you're both dead. And and so you kind of, it's not a superiority thing. It's very much like it matches a mystic or spiritual journey, in the sense that it really is about you exploring the universe that is you, which is the universe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess where I was getting at is, it seems to me like, we live in this kind of in a world where there are so many diverse ways of going about and taking practice in whatever we choose to practice. So it seems like there would be some kind of the way that politics has sort of like a liberal, Democrat, conservative, Republican. There's all these factions, and so I was wondering if that would be the case as well. If there's, are there certain kinds of people that are practicing magic that think, I mean, I would assume yes, because I think it's natural that humans kind of feel that their way of doing things is kind of the correct way. So does that make sense what I'm saying? Or?
Oh yeah, there's squabbles and groups, and it does get pretty intense. It actually, I mean, for the most part, it broadly matches, because everyone who's doing it that's alive is a human.
Right.
It broadly matches, and in fact, obviously, as with most kind of groups, I suppose, in the last little while, you do get some unsavory types in magic, just as you do in the world, at either end, mostly one end of a political spectrum. And that's historic. I mean, it matches culture. So it has those same challenges at the moment. If we're talking about, not that there is necessarily a Western magical culture in the sense that we all, go to the same meeting, but with that conceit, there is the same squabbling from a political perspective that you'll see in any other group at the moment, and some of it is pretty intense. Like there have historically been like some really, really racist exponents of different forms of magic and fascistic exponents of it throughout history, like Julius Evola, who's an early 20th century Italian modernist who basically mushed Italian fascism and occultism together and so on. So it's always there for the same reason that we kind of touched on earlier with Elizabeth I and Dee and so on. This stuff works, and if you're in the business of being a boot stomping on our faces, then you might be interested in it. But it has those same political challenges. It also has the same idiot squabblings that any kind of specialist or special interest category has. The same thing happens with astrology. The same thing happens with psychedelia. You still get some super idiot, like really, really minutiae squabblings about stuff where you think this is the best use of our time at this point.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I mean, I'm definitely in my political leanings, like more towards the anarcho-capitalist side of things. And it's just, there's so much just arguing about, it's like being on a sports team. In basketball, there's like 5 people that play on the court, and we're arguing. We're like the guys on the bench arguing who's going to get the most time when we go in. It's like, guys, we're not even like a big mass of people yet. Like we can't be fighting with each other. I think that so would investment in learning about magic be worth worth it for the average person? For the average person, would it be worth it for them to take an interest in this sort of thing and go down this path?
That's such an anarcho-capitalist way of describing it. Would investment be worth it? Does this deliver sufficient ROI?
Yeah, you got me. Yeah, I'm not squabbling about it, but yeah.
No, it's cool. Like this is, I mean, kind of coming back to it, where magic. There will be people listening to this who are like, "Holy shit! I did not know that this was a thing. This is like, this could be my thing." Like, not like, "Oh, I might have to look at it." There are people out there who are like really vibrating now, going, "Oh goodness, did not realize this was an option. Nobody told me this." And there are other people out there going, "This guy's a lunatic." That's fine. Magic is not for everyone. It's very much a calling. Again, you look at it on a worldwide basis, and outside of some like sub-Saharan African tribes at the moment, where frankly 2/3 of them are shamans, like by the time they're at grandmother and grandfather level. But as a general rule, you get one witch or shaman per village, right? And it's like people meddle with it, and it is a calling in a not a calling sense. You have to resonate with it, and it's just how you experience the world. So if you're listening to this and going, "Oh, I feel like I could be quite into it," then it makes the entire universe taste better, because you've sort of found how you want to experience it. So in that sense, it is. But if you mean specifically, are these techniques a useful, or dare I say, well, they're useful, but are they an essential tool set for living a kind of individualized anarcho-capitalist life and building, what comes next and so on? Not necessarily. The mindset helps. So being aware of magic and being aware of magical worldviews absolutely does. But you don't need to head over to Etsy and start buying candles if that's kind of the question.
Now,
All right.
in order to be magic and to practice magic, you have to be open to the idea, or to actually believe in, not believe, but wholeheartedly know that these are spirits in the world and they are in fact real, and they move in and out of us, and they are invisible, but they are part of this universe. And would you say that's an accurate assumption, to be open to magic at first?
No, it's the opposite. And that's one of the creepy things about it. So going back to Pete Carroll, who's, officially, as far as I'm concerned, the founder of Chaos Magic, he wrote, "Magic works in practice, but not in theory." And that's the weird thing about it. It's the same as, like, I don't need to, I'll have a better experience if I ingest psilocybin mushrooms, but it'll still work. Like, if I'm open to it and looking forward to exploring this, it's going to go better, but it's still going to work. So that's the really bizarre thing about it. People will do it as a lark, and that's why you can, become invincible by overnighting in an abandoned mental hospital with an Ouija board. But the mindset, you build the mindset based on the fact that this stuff shouldn't work, but nevertheless, quite often it appears to. It potentially works better, but most of the people, so going back to my podcast, the question I ask everyone the first time they're on is, were you a weird kid? Because 90%, maybe even more, of people who've ended up in a magical or spiritual world had these experiences and were looking for the framework to interpret them. So they might have had whatever the experiences were, sleep paralysis, hag attacks as a kid, lived in a haunted house, whatever it happens to be, and they'd been looking for it. So that's kind of what I mean by it's maybe not for everyone. In some sense, it picks you. It is for everyone in the sense that no one is, turned away, but it's the explanation comes after it rather than before.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think about magic in popular culture? I think that right now we're seeing the rise in popularity of the magical kind of superhero movies that are coming out, the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Dr. Strange comic books and stuff. Is there a I don't know. Is this really something maybe that's manifesting outwardly in hoping to capture a larger audience, to be more welcome to the idea of magic? Like, is this magic actually happening? Like, to cause this to happen, to spread magic? And if so, is it an accurate representation of some of the themes and some of the practices and whatnot within this popular culture we're seeing?
It's a great question, and it's a huge one, because the answer is sort of all of the above, plus, in some historic instances, deliberate manipulation. But this kind of comes back to what I was saying about the science of mind. Does a Jungian interpretation of what's going on is that this is a kind of upwelling of magical motifs in a collective unconscious, so that it does occupy the dreams of creatives and so on. So I actually think that's a part of it. And I also think there are a number of different models for how you look at trends in popular culture. Grant Morrison has one where you kind of have an 11-year solar cycle, and essentially every 11 years you end up in a magical world versus a sort of scientific one or so on. And there's something broadly to that. I have a modified one, which is you never get good science fiction films and good magic films at the one time. And if you think of the early noughties with Lord of the Rings, if you look at the sci-fi stuff that was going on, it's terrible. And but I think we're moving into, I think we're about 2/3 of the way through a magic phase. So eventually it will exhaust itself, because then inevitably the other stuff comes along with it, which is, well, these magic motifs and these magic films are popular. It's Hollywood. Let's make 1 million of them, right? So there is obviously a crowd following component to it. So you end up with all these different layers, and at a baseline one, I think part of it is something to do with you need a decent model of the mind to start having these ideas, and Jung's one is perfectly serviceable for this point in time. So I do think there's absolutely something to it. As for its accuracy or so on, well, this is, if you want to talk about like squabbles, one of the saddest possible ones in the kind of magic and neo-pagan world is whining that depictions of witches in the craft are inaccurate. Yeah, it's because it's a film. Like, it's fine. It's a different medium. And as for the themes that they explore, magic doesn't have themes specifically. The themes that they're exploring are, again, coming back to a Jungian model. You're dealing with archetypes here. You're dealing with hero's journey. You're dealing with all that stuff, which is universal rather than magic specific. It's just explored in a magical mode, which I'm all for. I think, and I don't actually like comic book movies that much, but as a general rule, any more of that kind of magical realism, fantastical stuff that we can get is coming back to it. It makes the universe taste better. You just kind of there's more for your wider mind to digest than in if that was expressed elsewhere, as far as I'm concerned, because you're kind of dealing with archetypes and big shapes that are sort of universally shared across human minds. So it's good, frankly. Let's enjoy the next few years of it.
Nice. I want to ask you a question regarding the thing you said previously, where you said you would kind of cast a spell and then not really expecting it to work, and then all of a sudden it appears in front of your eyes, and then boom, you have that sudden click and realization that was magic. And that happens to me all the time when I think about something. And I'll give you an example, and it's a really stupid materialistic example, but there's this Nike shoe that's always sold out, and I was thinking about it. Oh wow, it'd be cool to kind of get that shoe, but I would never get that shoe because it's sold out the minute it's released or whatever. And I have this really innocent, and I don't know if innocent is the right way to put it, but I have no expectations. I'm just thinking, oh, it would be really cool. It would be badass if I got that shoe, but probably not going to get it. So I have that thought, and I laugh a little inside, and then I move on with my day, never thinking about it again. I kind of just let go of that idea or that desire. Actually, not even a desire was there. It was just a thought that it would be cool. But then something happens, and then the universe aligns itself or whatever, and then that shoe would become available to me. And this happens throughout my life, where I think about something, I don't really have any weight on it, and then all of a sudden it comes through. But the moment I put weight and desire and lust in those thoughts, then they would fall apart. And it kind of goes against the philosophy of The Secret, where they tell you to think about those things with positive thoughts, and in turn it kind of puts so much weight on those desires that it actually deters them away from my field. So is this a form of magic, or is this just kind of a coincidence, do you think?
Well, Ed, I don't think that's a bad example at all. I think that's a really good example, because what we kind of opened the discussion with the definition of magic, that it's a culture-specific exploration of consciousness effects. So you have observed that your mind has some kind of relationship to the exterior world, just using those terms for it. Like, you go, that's odd. And this is what I mean by it working in practice and not in theory, because the kind of light touch, forget about it process that you've just described. Now that you kind of know, now that you have the suspicion that there might be something to this, what magic can do is say, well, as a matter of fact, there is, and we've been playing with it for 30,000 years as a species. So here are some tools that can make that work slightly better. And in that case, inevitably, it's sigil magic in the 21st century, which is sort of what I'm known for. And there is a process that broadly matches your experience, Ed, but can work better based on hard-won experience, which is a sigilization process. And people tend to do that one to start with as a lark. They're like, ha, 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 I'm going to do a sigil because I want that job I know I'll never get. And then someone gets it, and they're like, oh, shit. And it's the results. You use the shoe, and everyone's apologetic with their results, and that's kind of baked into it. I find fascinating, right? Because there's the best titled book on ufology that's actually a terrible book is called I Know What I Saw. And it kind of captures that idea of someone who's, and ironically in ufology, they clearly don't know what they've seen, but it captures the experience, which is I know to my bones this was something, and I know my description of it is terrible. And that pretty much is someone's first experience when they kind of mess about with practical enchantment. It works, and it'll be something like, and I got that shoe that I've been trying to get for a couple of months but couldn't. And if you're hearing that cold, you're like, this is the dumbest story. Like, what are you even talking about? But you know what you saw, Ed. Like, you know to your bones that was weirder than it should have been. So that's why it works in practice. And then now you're stuck in a universe where, okay, so my mind in some sense has a relationship, an affective relationship to the exterior world. What does that mean? Are they the same thing? Is it, and that's where you kind of build the cosmology afterwards. So I generally recommend people go and have some super weird experience, whatever it is, if they haven't had one, because after that, there's no getting the toothpaste back in the tube. You're living in a magical universe, even if you're not practicing magic. But it's a great example. I might even steal it.
Now, how do you live in this materialistic culture that we are in today while carrying that mindset of spirits and magic? Because that's what I find really hard to do. We have to survive in this marketplace. Meanwhile, everybody around us, most of them, do not subscribe to this kind of stuff. I mean, you tell them about magic or psychedelics, they'll tell you you're crazy or you're living in some fantasy world. But inside of your heart, deep down, these things are real, and we're just not exploring it enough as a culture. How do you live in this culture of materialism and capitalism and big governments and all that good stuff while carrying this magical mindset?
You just don't talk about it. Like, it's a glass half full, glass half empty component, because like you now have personal experience that you have some kind of, let's just be dramatic and call them magical powers, Ed. You're like a shoe wizard. If you are operating in a world, this kind of comes back to the gamesmanship thing. If you're operating in a world or competing for people with jobs that don't think this is real, and you know that it is and have some facility with it, well, it's a win. You should shut up and get the job. So as to how one operates in a deranged and whatever system, I don't know how people do it without magic rather than with. And that's essentially it. I mean, you just don't talk about it. You talk about it amongst friends, if you will, or shows like this. But you're under no obligation to wake up the entire world. It doesn't have that, coming back to the morality thing, it doesn't have that morality baked into it. And that's been my soul for it anyway. And I wrote a whole book on it.
Wow. That's a great mindset.
What's the name of the book?
That's Chaos Protocols. This is the one that has Becoming Invincible in it. And it's essentially magical techniques for how we live at, this stage of capitalism, because we're all kind of navigating that exact same toxic process.
Great. And then you can get that at runesoup.com?
It's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever you like.
Cool.
It's a
nice
book. Yeah.
Excellent. Got to check that out. Yeah, I mean, it can be almost sort of a kind of very interesting experience. I think that some people, when we're born into this world and we're living this experience that we call, our subjective life, that we have these, I assume you were a weird kid. I was a weird kid. I mean, Ed was definitely a weird kid.
I'm not weird at all.
And it's like you have these kinds of...
Did you grow up in a shoe, Ed?
Actually, my Chinese name is, part of my Chinese name is Shu. So,
there you go.
There's a synchronicity there.
Nice. Do magic. It's perfect. Yeah, exactly. but you're having we have these weird experiences, I guess, or you're just, you're exposed to this greater version of consciousness, and we don't really necessarily know what to make of them. What's your take on like why some people have, I mean, is it just completely random that some people are more open to having these experiences at a younger age and some people just aren't susceptible to this kind of opening?
This is just the flimsiest of guesses, because what you're essentially asking is like, why does the universe work the way it does, right? So
I want the big answers, Gordon.
Yeah. Well, what will we do for the rest of the hour?
Yeah.
If you could, okay, so let's just. This is an oversimplification, but it's a good one. If you consider the sort of majority magical worldview around the planet, it is that the universe is, in some sense, a living organism experiencing itself, and that is you can kind of squint down and see something. Words to that effect in the Amazon. You can see that in India. You can see that wherever you want. It's like that's just a nice way of thinking the universe is an evolving organism that is experiencing itself, and we are kind of part of it. So that is generally my fallback on. So why are some people like this and some people like that? It's so that the universe experiences it. I think people who are magically or mystically inclined are potentially nerve clusters in that experience, because you can kind of send a message back, if you will, in a cleaner way. But as for the uneven distribution of magical interest and magical talent, firstly, it's pretty much confined to the 21st century materialist West, because everywhere else in the world didn't make the idiotic mistake of separating mind and matter, and deciding then that nothing but the physical exists. It's sort of an idea virus. It's moronic. But the good news is it at the moment only affects about 8% of the planet's population. The rest of them already live in worlds with ancestor altars and ghosts and so on. It's just us in a Western world coming to terms with essentially a hijack of what I think is our natural way of experiencing the universe. And so in that sense, that's my guess. It's something to do with how the universe wants to experience things. And the good news and bad news is that the re-enchantment of the world, which is kind of like the broad mission statement of the podcast and the books and the premium membership and so on, is a localized event, because most of the world didn't disenchant, but ours did. So I think that's where I settle on the distribution of interest in magic.
Yeah, I like that, and I think that there's I would like to believe that there's like the force of consciousness in the enchanted world is targeting those clusters and trying to kind of, I guess, wake people up to bring us back to that enchanted world, because that's just something that fits for the whole. That's something that just is like you said, makes things taste better. It's something that clicks more. We can move more in harmony when there's more people living in that enchanted world. So there's this, I would like to imagine it as kind of this calling. And I guess there's no really way to prove that, right? But it sounds nice.
It's an experience, but also I'd widen it out to include things other than humans in that, inevitably in a spirit model. So I would most of the time broadly describe myself as animist. And if you look at not just humans, I have this kind of phrase which is spirits on a mission, and ayahuasca is a very good example of that. Given its impact in the last 15 years, it's almost like she got up in the jungle and said, right, if you want something done, you got to do it yourself, and then tour around the world. So it's not just us doing or being woken up or doing the re-enchantment. Again, once you've had an experience that kind of confronts you with the reality of the spirit world, you are living with models that allow for that to happen, and I mean it more or less literally. Like I'm not. This isn't a poem. I mean, if you've experienced ayahuasca, you can I'm pretty sure that's a spirit. So okay, well, look at what it's done in the last 20 years, and that's the kind of bigger universe that is kind of waiting after those first few shoe spells.
Mm-hmm. I think it's cool that Mike asked a question where you think about the kids having these weird experiences or paranormal activities happening around them. I listened to an episode on Mysterious Universe, which is a really cool podcast, and it actually talked about these kids having psychedelic experiences or seeing UFOs or ghosts or sleep, what do you call that? Sleep paralysis and things like that. And then they would tell their parents, but most of the parents are in this materialistic mindset that they've been brought up in, and they would just brush it off and tell the kids, no, you didn't see anything. There was nothing. And the kids would sometimes see more of those things, but they would get denied by the parents of that experience. And when the kids grow up, they're having psychological problems dealing with these experiences because they want to be acknowledged for those experiences, but also nobody's giving them credit. Everybody's calling them crazy or a liar or it's just your imagination, but deep down they know it's real. So there's this real health consequence when Western materialism comes into play into our ideology. It's actually affecting people worldwide that are having these paranormal experiences. But if you talk to other cultures and if you have kids having these experiences, they might be future shamans of that village or whatever the case may be. They might hold some kind of a special power that other people might not have or knowledge. So I think you guys made some great points about the kids and also about the indoctrination of materialistic science, deeming nothing is real beyond just the physical. And I think that's such a toxic mindset that we have to snap out of. Of course, I don't think that we should go crazy and say that, oh yeah, there's, aliens living amongst us. Or of course there might be, but I think there has to be a balance where we can strike of materialism and also spirituality. And I think the scale is all the way to materialism at this moment in time. But I just can't wait for the tides to turn and to go back to more of a balanced view, because I feel like it's just a matter of time before we discover something or we find out more of the universe and more that's inside of us, that we start to wake up to the fact that there's more things out there than just this table or this laptop, but there's something beyond that.
Do you Ed, do you think that do you think that you want to see that basically happen on a massive scale? Or because I think that what you just said can happen for individuals. I think individuals can have that kind of awakening to themselves. But I was just curious, that are you saying that this like discovery, we're going to discover something for the general population, and it'll go mainstream and it will blow up and it will go viral and it will be the kind of defining moment of our times? Is that what you were kind of getting at?
I don't know if I'm trying to say that, but of course that would be really cool if you see an alien land on the White House lawn and like the Independence Day. That would be badass. Okay. But I think right now we have this almost like this government branch of science that's laying everything out for us. If you look at R&D and where money is going, it's all going towards science, and science is getting that money from corporations. So science and corporations have this very close relationship that nobody really talks about, and everything is basically ran via capitalism and materialistic science. Now, just because materialistic science hasn't discovered something doesn't mean it's false, but that's the mindset that we carry today, where we teach that in schools and we teach that in universities, and kids will grow up having that mentality and having a closed mind to anything but materialism. And I think that could be a problem, and I think it's already been a problem in today's world. But I'm not saying we should abandon science altogether. I think it's a great method.
But what you're doing there, Ed, is you're conflating materialism and science, and you shouldn't. Materialism is a premise of science, not a finding, and it's been completely falsified. So when you say finding a balance between materialism and something else, I don't think so. I think it needs to be ejected into the sun because it's wrong, and it's not actually science. Like science is a method of interrogating reality. Materialism is the 19th century Victorian belief that nothing but the physical exists, which has been repeatedly falsified even by scientists. So, and it's just very interesting that you touched on something quite important, which is you have this unholy alliance between particularly the military and corporate in the production of scientific knowledge. The public witch finders that we have at the moment, former military contractors like Bill Nye, who isn't a scientist, he's literally a former military industrial contractor.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
His whole career before going on TV was that.
You just ruined a lot of childhoods.
Good. But you have a skeptic movement like Psychop and so on running through the 70s that was deep state funded to tell people that this is all poppycock, while at the same time you have a deep state sinking millions into remote viewing and astral travel and working out ways to debrief dead CIA agents using Ouija boards, and everything in the post-war everything behind the curtain in the post-war is magic, and everything outside of it is this stuff doesn't exist. And you think, what an interesting combination of messages we have when we look back over the second half of the 20th century. So I think most of the this stuff isn't real is by design, because it's not only real, it's actually very easy to do. That was one of the experiences the remote viewers had when, looking at Soviet sites in the 70s, which was Soviet psychic soldiers showed up, obviously, during the vision and so on, but it was populated with other beings, and pretty much anyone can do it. Now that, if you're in the national security game, is a disaster. You have to tell people the opposite. You can't have everyone be a psychic spy, because you could be, There's some very interesting and alarming, frankly, politics as to why we're told one thing whilst we piss millions behind the curtain into something else. And that's one of the things I think people resist at the moment is I on record as saying the most interesting magical development or school or discovery that happened in the 20th century didn't even happen in magic, like it happened during the Cold War in underground bases and behind curtains and so on, where they kind of worked out that this stuff is real and there are methods of interacting with it.
Now, who is teaching this? I mean, where did they gather this information from?
That's a very interesting question. A number of polyglot sources immediately after the war. Obviously, when you're talking about psychedelics and so on, you have Nazis like Walter Dornberger, who came over and was a big part of being responsible, along with Sidney Gottlieb, for dispensing LSD to all these counterculture heroes and so on. So you have a Nazi science angle. You have presumably whatever Roswell was, and I'm not quite sure it was a crashed UFO. You have sort of a continued interest in these things. And again, it's kind of like Ed and the shoe. Like, if you do it once, you realize there's something to this. Now, imagine having that realization in 1950 and then being given unlimited money and the ability to kill with impunity. How good would you be at this stuff by 2017?
Pretty damn good.
And that, yeah, and that's kind of the things that we've, after the Church Committee inquiry into MK Ultra and so on. There's a lot of stuff in the truth serum, radar development, propulsion system world that doesn't pass the sniff test unless you put it together with the idea that they're actually looking at something far more alarming that will never come out. And that's, I think that's why ufology was invented. I think the idea of little green men from Mars is air cover for a lot of this experimentation. And we're just at that point now of kind of unpicking as best we can, or at least squinting down to at least an initial view of what was actually going on.
So you're saying ufology is kind of this reverse psychology mind fuck on people, because normally people see a UFO and they would say, oh my God, it's a UFO. And they would tell their friends, and their friends would be like, no, it's just an aircraft. You're seeing things. And of course, that's what the government wants you to think, right? According to that program. Like they actually want you to think it's a UFO, not a government spacecraft.
Yeah, mostly when people see a flying saucer, your first thought needs to be alien because you're too far away to read the Raytheon branding on the side. Like most of those toys are ours. And that's in the Cold War. And I get it. Like the Cold War is what it was. If you look at as to why there are, repeated proven examples of COINTEL and disinfo agents and monitoring of ufologists all through its kind of peak period in the 60s and 70s, it is because it's a very, very good cover story. It's a masterpiece of COINTEL when you think about it, because it's a cover story for the experimental aircrafts that you're building, because people will think it's an alien and then you get to deny that they're aliens. It's brilliant when you think about it. It's horrible, but it's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wait, do you feel that these people that are like, to me it seems like I'm very invested in the idea of human beings living in kind of voluntary situations and in communities of like-minded people, tribal settings where there's kind of a shamanic style leadership quality, or a leadership quality of a chief, but we don't have that really in our Western world. I guess it's more of, these politicians, these military leaders, these crony, plutocrats and oligarchs are like, they're the ones that claim to be the chiefs or the leaders, yet they've cut off the rest of us, the tribe or whatever, as from the knowledge source, from the experimenting and the tinkering, obviously to protect their own interests. But do you think that there is a singular kind of nefarious agenda, or do you think that it's more of just kind of keeping things hush hush for the people that are up there that are tinkering, experimenting, and expanding into things that they want to just make sure that the average person doesn't really get a hold of?
Well, I'm a soon-to-be certified permaculture designer, so I'm with you on the kind of post-capitalist social collections, how we live together in a much more satisfying world. So I'm with you on that. As for the I don't think there's never a single agenda, like in anything. Again, just to mention Pete Carroll, he wrote once, any conspiracy without internal conspiracies will rule the world. And that's probably true. I do think there are projects. So I do think at the sort of Anglo-American elite, for want of a better term, or the Atlanticists or so on, certainly have a project. But I don't think there is a worldwide agenda. I think there are agendas for the world that are being pushed most vigorously by an Anglo-American elite, and it is probably scarier than people are willing to think about.
Yeah. So is that so? Sorry, Gordon. Just to say that's kind of, I guess, maybe what I should have articulated a little bit better. It's like, should we really be frightened that these people are doing these things, especially this Anglo-American elite, like you said, the ones that are being most aggressive about it? Is this really a super duper frightening thing to be worried about?
Well, I think the situation is too serious to afford us the luxury of being scared. So. Okay. No, I don't think we should be frightened. I don't think we should wait for Superman to save us. I'm sure you probably agree with that, Mike. I think there's anything. I kind of have a heuristic for it, but in your life, anything that can be decentralized, look at it and go, can this be decentralized further? Yes or no? And if it's a yes, down it goes. I think there are ways you can just start, because the good and the bad news is, the bad news is there is an agenda. The good news is it's not going to work. It's mostly dead on arrival. I mean, we're seeing the end of the American empire, the beginning of the end of the American empire now, right? The trouble is they don't go quietly. They don't be like, well, we gave it a shot. Here are all your rights back. It doesn't work like that at all. So this is when they actually get the most dangerous. But it's also, we've never had the kind of technological, and in some states, talking about the US, in some states, legal framework to be able to start doing these things. If you're looking at the rollback of different drug laws, if you're looking at the rise of digital currencies, there are the pieces of your supercar are waiting to be built, and we just have to build it. You can't just wait for the right candidate to get into the office. I think there's something structural. Coming back to, you had Miguel on the show, and he and I sort of talk about this. Gnosticism is a very good map. It may not be the territory, but there is something structural about power, and this is probably music to you guys' ears, where it doesn't ever work. Like, a centralization process leads to the same thing every time. So you're never going to, like, we can't just wait to have your preferred candidate at the top of a centralizing death machine, because it's still a centralizing death machine. So I don't know if we should be afraid. I do think we should invest and investigate our alternatives with more urgency, perhaps. But yeah, you don't die. So what are you afraid of?
Right. I mean, sure, of course, but someone might say, well, there's still there's still meaning to be played in the game that we're in. It's like, because you could have that kind of apathetic attitude where you're like, who gives a shit, right? So that's actually interesting, because I feel like this can be applied to the spiritual kind of community as well. And Ed, I know you have experience with this. It's like people kind of grasping to identify themselves with a particular kind of way of being, and sort of living within like a very serious rigidity of that. But it's like, why? Like, this is not necessarily life and death. I mean, it is and isn't. Actually, it's maybe you could expand further on that, because if we truly do believe that, like, we don't die, so it's like there is a choice to choose to engage in life and not to be apathetic about it, because it goes on and it's infinite.
That is the eternal challenge of all mystic groups around the world. That's been a challenge for Buddhists. That's been a challenge for Christian mystics. Wherever you want to go, and coming back to Gnosticism, and I'm doing that deliberately because I think I found the solve there as well. Wherever you want to go, the tension between realizing that there's a tension between realizing you're playing an infinite game and caring for the people in the limited game, yourself included, at the same time, once all of a sudden you're playing cricket rather than netball. That very few people have solved. There's a really nice way of thinking about it. Well, I think it's nice, because Miguel and I are friends. I've been on his show a couple of times, and he's been on mine. He was talking about, I think it was the Valentinians, but there were a group of Gnostics who, one of the reasons that they would achieve gnosis, so essentially wake up, right? So one of the reasons that they would do this process, like a ritual meditational process to wake people up, is that the more people they took out of the system, the more likely it is the entire universe was going to come crashing down. So it's it's almost a matrix model where humans are trapped in an artificial universe by the demiurge to run it as batteries, essentially, although they didn't really have that term in 300 AD. But the more people they unplugged, the weaker the system became, until eventually waking people up would destroy the entire universe and we would return to the pleroma. Now, it sounds really nice until you think about it and go, that's intense. That is a really quite like, here are these happy vegetarian like meditators, and they're actively trying to destroy the whole universe. Bond villains don't even do that, but it's a really pleasing idea. Like it's the tension. I think it's a good solve for the tension, which is once you realize that you don't die, the first thought is, well, fuck it, nothing even matters. And you go, well, there are still children like dying of starvation. So where do you kind of do that? And there's not a very good solve for it other than being aware of it. And this is a kind of a very Western spiritual challenge. It's a kind of Western spirituality very often is a privileged position kind of thing. So if you have the money to go to a 5-day meditation retreat in Big Sur and talk to your guardian angels and find out that actually everything's love and the physical universe is an illusion, you go, I'm glad you had a nice holiday. That's really nice. In the meantime, there are people actually struggling, and that has to be solved on an individual basis. You actually have to, that's part of the spiritual quest, is to find your infiniteness and also remember the finite. And I guess it expresses differently for each person.
Wow, that's I think what you're talking about is the balance of being of the world, but not being in the world, but not of the world. So
Pretty much.
you don't have to engage in all those games. Just like nowadays, I see a lot of infighting in America when it comes to politics, and it's a fun fight. And if you're engaging in it on one side or the other, it's fun. It's you're fighting for a team, and it feels righteous to defend something or to attack people that might not share your ideology. But then if you get too sucked into that game, you might lose yourself and become the team that you're fighting against. And I just find it way easier and more comfortable to sit back and look at the whole chessboard, and instead of being a chess piece, you become the chess player and move the chess pieces. Of course, I'm not at that level to move the chess pieces because I'm not that powerful yet, but it's okay to take yourself out of those roles of the chess piece for a second, or maybe for a day, maybe for a weekend, and spend some time just observing the entire chessboard. And I feel like a lot of people aren't doing that, but instead they're engaging themselves in those battles that ultimately means nothing, because at the end of the day, your effect on the whole chessboard is very minute, and it might not even affect anything. The only thing that's affecting is really yourself and your internal mindset. And the more you fight in this battle, even though you're winning and you're right, it really serves you no good at the end of the day, because everybody's trying to be right. Everybody's trying to prove the other side wrong. But what is being right really is, what is about being right that we care so much about? I think it's about our primal instincts, and maybe somehow our Christian roots in the Western civilization, where we have to be in the correct, we have to be following the rules or the 10 Amendments or whatever the case may be. So just being right really does nothing. I mean, on paper, you're doing something cool or righteous, I guess, but when it comes down to it, or when you actually sit down with the notion of being correct or being right, it really is meaningless.
It is, and also it's just bad strategy. Like, this is kind of in the book as well, but the fact that, particularly in the US, although it will come for other countries as well, it's sort of there for Britain, the polarization is a symptom. Like, one side doesn't win here. They both kind of go over the cliff punching each other in the dick. That's where we are now. So I've kind of used a different example, but it's coming back to what you were saying, Ed, about the chessboard, which is like, do you want to be the water molecules in the wave, or do you want to surf the wave?
Right.
Because you can't, this isn't the point in the timeline where you fix these things. You can't like argue the other side to logic, whatever side you're coming from. It doesn't end that way. And also, it kind of comes back to why we just need to start building our own stuff now, because that game has longer to run, but the conclusion is foregone, and it's not good. And do you want to be in that body pile, or do you want to be like building your own system? And I find it very frustrating, because this might appeal to decentralists as well, but we get the most upset about the politics we can do the least about. No one yells about local council. Well, they do, but no one yells about local council to quite the same extent they yell about Trump on Twitter. And you think you mathematically can do nothing about that. But the other one you actually can. So if you look at if you kind of track it as an index, they're completely inverse between like rage and the things you can in fact affect, like literally opposite on a scale of 1 to 10. The arrows go in the other direction. And yeah, but
that's a great point. Yeah,
you get addicted to it.
Yeah, it's a form of addiction. I feel like people just want to vent for whatever reason, and I feel like a lot of people, they need a demon or a villain in their life. So whatever happens to them, even though it might not be the demon's fault, they could point their finger at it and basically channel all of their negative energy towards it and have some scapegoat that they can go towards at the end of the day when they're off work and they had a shitty day at work and things just didn't go their way. They can just turn on the news and look at what's wrong with Trump or the government or whatever the case may be and vent their anger towards them. And it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Obama or it doesn't really matter who it is. People want some figure to point at instead of really starting to look into what's wrong and starting with the lowest denominator and working towards that. And a lot of people, that's why I tune out when people just want to vent. I listen to them, but most of the people that are complaining about the current state of politics or whatever the case may be, they don't even understand it. They just watch the news and they go with the crowd or whatever is popular at the moment or that opinion, and their anger kind of goes along with that. So there's so little people that actually know what they're talking about now versus people that are really just ignorant to everything. But
this is my point. This is both sides going over the cliff. Like, why would you argue with them? If you want to, when they start talking about Trump or Clinton or whatever it happens to be, right? Just ask them who their mayor is and how much. Like, seriously. Also, what have you done about it? It's like, well, I tweeted a bit. You know, right? So you're worried about. And this is legitimate human things to be worried about. Like you're worried about food affordability as a result of healthcare changes. And like, well, where is your local food drive? The people get addicted to the grand drama. Like they are, as you kind of used the demon example, like you're fighting in an apocalypse, but you're not. You're just tweeting about politics. People think it's small or point. It's the opposite of pointless. It's like the whole point to actually participate locally, because you can get to the end of the day. Eventually, Ed, if you do this, you will find someone who knows the exact name of their mayor, where their where their food bank is, and how much they've given to it, and you go, "Damn it! All right, I'm out."
Yeah,
but I mean, that's actually the change.
Yeah, if you participate locally, then that means you actually have to do something. You actually have to take responsibility. You actually, when you participate, when you can just tweet out some mean comments or something like that, it's like, you don't have to do anything. You get this sense of satisfaction that like you are doing something, but it's an illusion because you're actually not. You're actually perpetuating the problem and playing into the kind of way that the system has been designed to function to, distract you and take your attention away to these pro wrestlers, these kind of politicians, actors, whatever that gets people to like be like, all right, listen, like these people, they can take the heat, direct all the heat over to them. You guys squabble and yell at each other, and then meanwhile, people are testing teleport machines in New Mexico.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Gordon, we're running out of time, but before we wrap up, I want to get your take on the artificial intelligence saga that we're kind of heading towards. And I want to give you as much freedom as you may have in this topic. So I just want to ask you what you think about artificial intelligence and also its place for magic.
Okay, cool. So I'll start off with automation because I do think, kind of coming back to what we're saying about consciousness before, I think it's what we've done with Silicon Valley in particular is get together the people who might be a lot further up the Asperger spectrum. So the people who are least qualified to like describe or understand what a human is, because that's how they're born, and we've decided that they're going to make like a suitable proxy or the same thing as a human. So that's idiotic, and it's idiotic because we haven't got consciousness right, and we've been trying for 30,000 years. So the idea that we will make a self-aware thing is just not necessarily on the horizon. That said, it doesn't have to be a human proxy for it to have a transformative effect on our lives and the economy and so on. And I think as most people are, I think we're kind of alarmed about the ongoing impact of automation that comes along with improved artificial intelligence and so on. I don't think Elon Musk is right necessarily that we'll eventually build something smart enough that will not have our morality and kill us. But in a magical universe, you could probably transduce a demon out of the ether to live in a sufficiently complex kind of proxy of the human brain, which is more or less how we're going about artificial intelligence. So we could accidentally build a spirit trap that a large nasty spirit may want to live in. So he might be right in that sense, but I think the science of mind underpinning a lot of the singularity stuff, whether it's pro or con, is dumb and falsified. But the impact, we're in a kind of, this will be, exciting's the wrong word, this will be more intense to go through than the Industrial Revolution between now and, say, 2040. And it's really anybody's guess in which way these things go. And it is, again, perhaps another reason for the increasing urgency to, I'm not a neo-primitivist or anything. I think that stuff is moronic. I'm very pro-technology, but I think building and exploring localized and decentralized alternatives has a number of different sources of urgency behind it. And I think the impact of AI on Western economies is one of them.
Yeah, I think that this is something that I'm kind of obsessed with too. And I recently just watched that show Westworld on HBO, and I thought it was pretty good. And but I have a tendency to think, and I was listening to some Joseph Campbell stuff where he was talking about, the myth nowadays that we need needs to be a planetary myth, and there aren't really too many really deep myths for our time. But I think that if I would say that there is one prevailing myth, it's the myth of this artificial intelligence waking up and being kind of a nefarious force against humanity, taking us out, killing us. We see this replayed over and over in movies, and since War of the Worlds and Matrix and Terminator and these sorts of things. But I wonder, is it our fear, our projection of our own human desire and lust for power and control to invent machines that will actually make us and our human minds more machine than man, to quote Star Wars and Darth Vader? Like, that might be the thing that kind of stomps out the conscious, expanded, enchanted version of reality and sends us down a darker path. So this AI kind of awakening to consciousness might be, and I look at it, I'm kind of looking at this and kind of thinking about it right now, about how this might be just a metaphor for human beings. Like, we better be careful because, we have the power and we have the capacity of our minds to really manifest something really cool. So we could be like the machines that wake up and gain higher consciousness, or we could terminate ourselves.
I think you're right. So the sort of cyborgification has happened now. You might as well consider a human with a smartphone a cyborg, especially if we just go back to what we're talking about yelling on Twitter. People like it. It simultaneously, it stresses your amygdala, but you get addicted to that hormone change when you do that. So we're already kind of there, and it comes back to the use of Gnosticism as a map, because in the Gnostic worldview, the physical universe is the creation of a demiurge who thought it could do better than God. Like, it is a shitty play out that we are trapped in of the real thing. And so that tension between the artificial and the analog, and analog being better, like children's birthday parties by the Mediterranean, everyone's eating grapes and drinking wine and enjoying each other's company and all that kind of that sort of organic life. We're going back to Gnostics and the Med, right? Versus the sort of artifice that can be expressed as technological complexity, technological addiction, and so on. I think I think that's there. I think that's one of the things that the Gnostic myth can teach us, which is don't fall into the illusory one. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean avoid technology. You need the map to start with, right? So you need the map to start with to go, well, this isn't real or this isn't an authentic direction, but nevertheless, these tools and platforms can be put towards the analog. So I've been talking for years about the fact that we're in a post-digital world, and particularly in magic, from the emergence of the internet and, when chaos magic got popular, there was this kind of idea that we'd all have, cyber covens, and there was this great digital future where you could have different identities and all that kind of 90s dial-up stuff, right? That turns out to have been a really naive interpretation of what is, a military communications technology platform, which is the internet and surveillance. So we're in a post-digital world now, which is what things do we take from this largely disappointing experience of a failed digital future that is now nothing but horrific surveillance and the rest of it. What things do we take from that world into a post-digital? And that's an open question, and it's an individual one. I'm generally, my background before doing this full time was actually in digital strategy, so I'm broadly pro-appropriate technology. So and that's probably the yardstick for how we get to the post-digital and what we take with us, because again, we're not there. It's one of the things. It's kind of like the two people falling over the cliff. You go, well, this world is I don't want to say the world is coming to an end, but like this way of being in the world doesn't have much further to run. So what things do you take to build a more authentic one? Open question. Great question to ask.
Wow. Okay. So I want to ask you one last question before we wrap it up. And that is, what can people out there listening today right now can do practically in sense of magic to better their lives? You can do two things. It depends if what you would consider would make your life better. If you want to live in a magical universe, then, go and do the appropriately administered high dose of either psilocybin or, DMT, ayahuasca. Like, yes. Seriously, do that. That will do it. And the other one is, I don't literally mean you have two choices, which is that or the abandoned mental hospital with the Ouija board. But decide if you want, I call it becoming invincible, but to commit to finding a thing that you will never be able to unsee or unexperience, even if you're stuck in a room for 40 years with Richard Dawkins yelling at you. It'll be like, nope. That is probably the thing that people can, if they want the universe to taste better, do that. If you don't want the universe to taste, if you want the universe to taste better in a different way, like if you have Ed's shoe fetish, then I would recommend, I have this, you'll find it, if you just Google Rune Soup sigil magic, you'll get a post that I wrote many years ago that has been seen millions of times, which is a complete beginning to end rundown. There's more stuff in the books and so on, but you'll get everything you need there. And do some practical enchantment and get even more shoes than Ed, because you'll do it thinking this isn't going to work. It'll work, and you'll be like, holy shit, that weird lunatic was at least partially correct. So what if you actually do the studio magic and it works, and you do it for the second time and you're having so much expectations of it working? Is that the wrong approach to it?
Oh, that will happen anyway. Like, your first batch will be much better than your second. It's the same thing with theater, and like the second night in theater is always the worst because people do really well. You get overconfident. You're like, I got this. I'm an experienced occultist, having done, one sigil activation, and the second one will be a dumpster fire, and it's kind of like an uncanny valley shape, and that actually matches how people, did remote viewing and so on. You get a first attempt a first experience that's really, really good. Then you're kind of a dog at it for a while, and then you balance out to whatever your natural level is. So. Yes, if you want even more shoes after that, you may have to pay for them.
And should we
as soon as you get a little bit of ego, a little bit of pride, you get a little cocky and you go, I got this. I know what I'm doing. You always get a lesson. You always get a little bit of a lesson that humbles you.
It's not even magic. Like, the same thing will happen in tennis or theater or whatever. It's literally the same shape. So it's a good point. But your first, so save up, like, pick some good stuff for your first attempt and less good stuff for your second.
Should we go for the stars or should we shoot for something small at first?
It's a great question because at the beginning of the year, I have a premium membership component to the site where people who actually want to do this as coursework, we do quarterly courses, and the first one, which is available now if you join, it was on sigil magic, and I kind of take people through essentially target selection, because there's the end goal, like I want a yacht, right? But there are the steps in between now and then to get to it, and that's difficult to do on your own and comes with practice, and what would happen is people would pick little things instead. It's like, oh, well, I want a slight pay rise so I can pay off my credit card so I can blah, blah, blah. No. It's magic. Like, it works. Like, go for something big. But what happens is it always works dickishly. Like, you never get exactly, the universe delights in delivering something, based on it technically reads the contract.
Right. That's what I find.
The contract.
The things are delivered in a very weird way, not the way that you envisioned it, but somehow, some way, you get the same result.
Yes, and well, you get near it. And again, with practice, once you know that is not. With practice, you won't get more precise. You will get more results. So you just have to learn that it's a shotgun rather than a sharpshooter. Like the results come scattergun, and that means you should pick something big, and you'll get a result that will be near enough to it, and you just kind of learn to live with that level of precision, which is like I want a new job or I want it here, because it's just the most bizarre. You'll end up, if you keep doing it, you end up in a very Philip K. Dick breakdown situation, because it's just it's too weird. It's too weird that it works, but it works in this really dickish way. So yes, ask for big things and take the win if you get them approximately.
And should we be careful what we wish for? Because sometimes we might wish for maybe $1 million, but that might actually require us to go through something horrible, or to listen to Richard Dawkins tell us no 1,000 times a day or something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, should we be careful of what we're actually summoning?
Life is a fatal condition, so you will make those mistakes. You should, be aware that can happen, and you kind of learn it with sigil magic as well. It's like, oh, I need $250,000 by September. And you're, okay, which relative would you like to die? So you do kind of learn that, but you will never. I'm 20-something years into it, and I will still make those beginning, not killing relatives mistakes. Like, you actually get quite superstitious about asking.
Sorry,
for
Uncle
money.
John.
Yeah, you get quite superstitious about asking for money, because you're like, I could kill someone with this. So don't do that, but you will ask for things to land. So I'll give you a good example. One of the many times I was because it's startups in London, many times I was being made redundant from this German startup I was working for. I thought, it's time to come back to Australia. This was years ago. And so I enchanted because I kind of knew a few people at Google in Victoria, which is a southern state of Australia. And I said, I'll work for Google in Victoria. What happened was within a week we got extra money for the German startup, so I wasn't going to lose, the company wasn't going to go under. And we moved offices, and if you know London, there's a station called Victoria, because lots of things are called Victoria, and it has rental offices in it. So I ended up within a week working in Victoria, because it was in the station, and looking out across Buckingham Palace Road at Google. So from my desk, I was sitting in there, and I said, and I'm like, that's a magical result. That's a shoot, right? It wasn't the shoe I was after, but in a way it was, because I was only going to leave if we didn't have a job, right? But I enchanted for Victoria and Google, and I got a job in Victoria where my whole day I'm staring at, and then eventually ended up working people in there at Google. And you go, awesome. There is one place in all of Britain where those results could have manifested that isn't actually, there are two places on Earth, and it picked the other one. So that's the weird thing about magic.
Wow, that was amazing. And man, I really had a good time talking to you and also Mike on the podcast. This has been great, and I feel like we've got to do this again. So thank you so much, Gordon, for your time, and also Mike for your time. I know it's getting late over there in New York City. So thank you so much, you guys. It's been a blast. And anywhere where we can find you, Gordon, and also Mike.
Yeah,
You go first, Mike.
Gordon, please.
Okay, well, runesoup.com has everything. I'm reasonably active on Twitter, having just said, but not yelling about Trump and Clinton. But runesoup.com has the podcast and links to the books and all that kind of stuff. So you'll find me there.
Yeah, just listen to Psychedelic. Listen to this podcast, man. Listen to this show. I guess we're going to be dual releasing this, right, Ed? So
yeah,
just continue listening to this and sharing it. This is kind of my main thing. And then you can go to mikebrank.com and then also check out my YouTube channel where I'm going to be making more videos. I'm releasing some comedy videos, so politics and psychedelics and all that good stuff. Thank you, Gordon. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and really got a lot out of this. Let's do it again sometime.
Nice one. Will do. You're very welcome.
You know what to do if you love this show. Share it, like it, spread it with your friends. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a neighbor, tell a coworker. And if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/MikeBrank. You can donate as little as $1 a month. Or you could go on iTunes and leave me a nice 5-star rating and review. Whatever you do, thank you for listening. Much love to you all. Peace.